In 1970, a Brazilian songwriter wrote what sounded like a love song. The chorus repeated a simple phrase, "Despite you, tomorrow will be another day." The government censors read the lyrics, saw nothing dangerous, and approved it. The record sold 100,000 copies in 3 months. And then someone in the regime figured out that you wasn't a lover. You was the military dictatorship. The government sent agents to the Philips recording studio, seized every remaining copy, and banned the song from radio. The songwriter's name was Chico Buarque, and that was only the beginning of a decade-long chess match between one man's pen and the entire apparatus of a military state. Brazil has produced sounds that rewired genres across the globe. Bossa Nova restructured jazz harmony, samba rhythms shaped Afrobeat, and Brazilian funk became a global streaming phenomenon. I've been mapping these connections for years, and this channel is where I lay them out. If untold music stories are your thing, subscribe and stick around. To understand Chico, you have to understand where he came from. His father was Sérgio Buarque de Holanda, one of the most important historians Brazil ever produced. The book Raízes do Brasil, Roots of Brazil, published in 1936, is still required reading in Brazilian universities. It redefined how Brazilians understood their own identity, the tensions between the personal and the institutional, between colonial inheritance and modern aspiration. Chico grew up in that household, surrounded by books, intellectuals, visiting poets, and the Portuguese language spoken at its most precise. That precision would become his weapon. He studied architecture briefly at the University of Sao Paulo, dropped out, picked up a guitar, and by 1966 he was standing on a stage at the second festival of Brazilian popular music on TV record. The song was called A Banda, the band. It was a simple, wistful march about a brass band passing through a town and making everyone forget their sadness for a moment. It tied for first place with Geraldo Vandré's Disparada, and overnight, a 22-year-old kid from a historian's household became one of the most famous voices in Brazil. The press called him the golden boy of MPB, Música Popular Brasileira. He had the looks, the pedigree, and the voice. What nobody anticipated was what he would do with all of it. But the country he was becoming famous in was no longer free. Brazil's military had seized power in a coup in 1964, and by December 1968, the regime dropped the hammer. Institutional Act No. 5, known as AI-5, suspended habeas corpus, shut down Congress, and gave the government the power to censor anything. Newspapers, television, theater, and music all had to pass through censors before reaching the public. Songs were submitted as typed lyrics to a government bureau. If the bureau said no, the song didn't exist. Artists who pushed back disappeared, were tortured, or were exiled. Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil were arrested and eventually forced to leave the country. Chico Buarque saw what was coming and left for Italy in 1969, a self-imposed exile that would last about a year. In Rome, he recorded an album with the legendary film composer Ennio Morricone. But exile didn't suit him. He missed Brazil, he missed the language, and he came back in 1970 believing things might have cooled down. They hadn't. When he returned, Chico began writing songs that functioned on 2 levels at once. On the surface, love songs. Underneath, political dynamite. Apesar de você, Despite You, was the masterpiece of this double game. Sung directly to a you who controls everything, who silences, who darkens the day, it reads as a breakup anthem until you realize every line maps onto authoritarian rule. The censors approved it. The public understood it instantly. 100,000 copies flew off the shelves. By the time the government grasped what had happened, the song was already the most popular record in Brazil. They banned it, invaded the pressing plant, and destroyed the remaining stock. But you can't unhear a song a nation already knows by heart. The regime's response was blunt. By 1974, the censors adopted a simple policy: reject anything with Chico Buarque's name on it. It didn't matter what the lyrics said. If he wrote it, it was banned. So Chico did something audacious. He invented a person. Julinho da Adelaide, a fictional songwriter from the Rocinha favela in Rio de Janeiro, complete with a backstory, an attitude, and even a newspaper interview. The journalist Mario Prata sat down with Chico at his father's house, and Chico, after spending an hour alone in his childhood bedroom getting into character, came downstairs and gave a full interview as Julinho. The newspapers printed it. Songs credited to Julinho de Adelaida, including Jorge Maravilla and Acorda Amor, sailed past the censors untouched. It worked until the Jornal do Brasil outed the hoax in 1975, and the game was over. But the most devastating protest Chico ever wrote didn't hide behind metaphor at all. In 1973, he and Gilberto Gil composed a song called Cálice. In Portuguese, cálice means chalice, as in the cup Christ asked God to take from him. But spoken aloud, cálice sounds identical to cálice, shut up. The entire song is built on that one devastating pun, a prayer to God that is also a command from the state. Shut up. The censors caught it. They banned it before it could be released. But Chico and Gil tried to perform it live anyway at the Fono 73 festival in Sao Paulo. As they began to sing, federal police walked onto the stage and cut the microphones, one by one, all 5 of them, until Chico was left standing in silence in front of a stunned audience. The song wasn't officially released until 1978, when the dictatorship began to loosen its grip. But the footage of that night, Chico standing on stage as the silence closed in around him, became one of the most powerful images of resistance in Brazilian cultural history. And then there was Construção. Released in 1971, it is the song that most Brazilians will tell you is his greatest work. And in 2009, Rolling Stone Brazil named it the greatest Brazilian song of all time. It tells the story of a construction worker on the last day of his life. He eats lunch, kisses his wife, goes to the site, falls from the scaffolding, and dies on the sidewalk. What makes it extraordinary is the structure. Every single line ends with a proparoxytone, a word stressed on the third to last syllable. Words like tímido, trágico, último, sábado, máquina. These heavy, unusual endings give the song a lurching, mechanical rhythm, like the grinding of a machine that doesn't care who it crushes. The worker is nameless. The city doesn't stop. Traffic jams around his body and moves on. It is a song about labor, about disposability, about a system that uses people up and throws them away. And it was released in the middle of a dictatorship that was doing exactly that. The album Construção became one of the best-selling records in Brazilian history, and the song has been studied in universities ever since, not just as music, but as literature. The military regime finally ended in 1985 after 21 years. Chico Buarque lived to see every general leave power. And unlike many artists defined by a single era, he kept creating. He pivoted to literature and became one of Brazil's most respected novelists. Budapest and Leite Derramado won him the Jabuti Prize, Brazil's equivalent of the Booker. In 2019, he received the Camões Prize, the highest honor in Portuguese language literature, though it took 4 years and a change of government before it was actually awarded to him, because Jair Bolsonaro refused to sign it. At 81, Chico Buarque is still alive, still writing, still the man who proved that a well-placed metaphor can outlast a tank. What Chico did was not just protest. It was proof that language, handled with enough intelligence and enough nerve, can pass through walls. The censors had the power to ban songs, to seize records, to cut microphones. But they could not keep up with a man who understood that the Portuguese language has more hiding places than any government could search. He coded revolution into love songs, invented a ghost to carry his message, and built a masterpiece out of words that fall like a man from a building. Every generation in Brazil still sings his lyrics. They just don't always agree on what they mean, and that is exactly the point. If these stories from Brazilian music are pulling you in, the fights, the codes, the art that governments couldn't kill, click the video on your screen right now, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on the next one.